yes.
And got spoon-fed their narrative out for years. Had some say in all of the final bad decisions. She's taking ownership of the last 4 years. That should be all of the final bad decisions. She's taking ownership of the last 4 years. That should be a millstone that sinks her. And stuff like this, which we just cannot get away from. Remember, not only did we see a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, we've seen a Russian aggression in Ukraine because of all the stupid messaging that people in NATO were doing and the corruption that exists there. This story is wild. And this is the second or third time that I've heard about it in the week. So I'll just read through it. A corrupt Ukrainian official's son was found laying in bed with huge sums of money totaling $6 million in total seized cash, various different countries' currencies. And what was going on is apparently a medical fraud operation. I'm not even going to try to pronounce these names. But apparently there was an official with the Ukrainian government who was responsible for medical examinations in his little area, not the whole country, just a small area. And he was the kind of go, no go, whether or not you would get a medical exemption to the conscription program they have trying to put soldiers in the field, which, by the way, kind of like just ignores the human cost of this conflict. They found, when they raided his house, they found literally millions of dollars in multiple currencies. These were all bribes that people paid into this official in order to not have to be taken into the front. So that's your tax dollars at work, because these monies were funding Ukrainian pensions, the Ukrainian government, were funding their war effort, were funding their munitions and so on, but we're also funding their corruption. Those dollars that you're seeing are American dollars, and I'm fairly confident they come from the corrupt apparatus that allows this to keep going on. Imagine finding out that a U.S. official was involved in having $6 million hanging out in their house that they took as bribes. We'd be outraged. And we should still be outraged because it's American dollars and it's over there in a place that we're funding. How do you deal with that? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And then they're going to give us this nonsense. This is the bread and circuses. I just saw this one too. The DOJ is very proud of this. This is moving to the worst thing that I've seen. 68 people were charged with violent white supremacy street gang in Los Angeles, feds say. This is from KCAL News. It's a local news station. It's a CBS affiliate. But at the end of the day, this is actually published on CBS News, the main national website. 68 people charged in a federal grand jury indictment detailing alleged crimes by here's the key part, a white supremacist street gang, which prosecutors say maintains an alliance with the Mexican mafia prison gang. Let's just digest that for a moment. White supremacists are aligned with the Mexican mafia prison gang, and they put that in the same sentence, unironically. The operation, apparently called Hate 18, a play on the 818 area code in Los Angeles. The FBI joined federal prosecutors and local law enforcement officials in Los Angeles to announce the arrest of 42 people in connection with the investigation, including 29 defendants in a single one-day raid. That's a pretty standard FBI move. A total of 68 people charged in a 76-count indictment going after the Peckerwoods of San Fernando Valley. Peckerwood is apparently a pejorative term for Caucasian people in prison. It is a group of guys that are aligned with the Aryan Brotherhood, but also the Mexican mafia, because nothing says white supremacy to me like a bunch of dudes calling themselves, as a joke, Peckerwood, being aligned with the Aryan Brotherhood, but also making alliances with the Mexican mafia, the Latino street gangs that control a bunch of the drug trade in California. At the end of the day, this is basically just a standard drug case. But what they also had to do, because we have a politically motivated and they are so desperate to justify the white supremacy claims, they have to talk about the white supremacist ideology, the neo-Nazi tattoos, the graffiti, the iconography like swastikas and images of Nazi aircraft and all this other nonsense. But all of this stuff, and including the name hate right in the operation name, all of that stuff is out there, and they're aligned with the Mexican mafia, which tells me that they don't really hate people that are not white that much. doesn't stop the U.S. attorney in the area from saying the Peckerwoods are a violent white supremacist ideology and wide-ranging criminal activity which pose a grave menace to our community. That may be true. They may be a quote-unquote destructive force. All of that can be true. None of that has to do with white supremacy if we're being honest about it, because the charges actually have nothing to do with hatred. All of the charges have to do with bank fraud, RICO, so that's the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, distributing controlled substances, that's drugs cases, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, so bank fraud and also the conspiracy to commit bank fraud. I always love that one. The tack on, like not only were you doing it, but you were thinking about doing it too with your buddies. Distribution of controlled substances, again, that's drugs. Aggravated identity theft, okay. Unlawful possessions of firearms and ammunition by felons, that's a pretty standard thing, that 922 charge. Possessions of firearms and furtherance of drug trafficking, again, same thing we heard about from that guy the other day with the terrorist charge. These are like boilerplate, very boring, every single day, what are called safe streets task force type work. So it's a white gang that allies with the Mexicans and they are a hate group. Again, they're digging so deep in the bag to try to justify this thing because they are going to try to justify the stuff that Kamala Harris says. That I'll play in a second. Here's another little thing that has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the opportunity costs when you're so fixated on hate crimes that you forget that there's like legitimate crimes and legitimate corruption happening with our federal government, which is not being investigated because it would be egg on everybody's face at DHS. This is a great little clip. It's the hypocrisy of the left. It's Stephen Colbert crying about the Trump administration losing 545 kids. And that makes him someone that you cannot vote for. By Stephen Colbert's standard, he should be pulling his hair out and lighting his face on fire with the 300,000+ kids that the Biden administration has apparently lost. You can't make this stuff up. The numbers here are even lighter than the reality of it. Let me just play this real quick. Here we go. Stephen Colbert losing his mind. Again, opportunity cost. If you're focusing in on hate 1-8, maybe you're not running down the actual trafficking. You're looking for white supremacist street gangs because they're white supremacists, and that's really good. Are we going after the black supremacist groups that are all over the East Coast that are in the prisons? Not that I see.
Think about the sheer number here. 545 kids. That's not a child on a milk carton. That's the whole dairy aisle. And yet there are still people who haven't made up their minds. There are still people who are going to vote for him. Maybe we feel too guilty to understand the magnitude of that crime and our responsibility.
And tonight, lawmakers urging the Biden administration to provide explanations for the disappearance of 85,000 migrant children.
It now approaches 100,000 children, according to public reports, 100,000 children lost by your department and the Biden administration, migrant children sold into labor trafficking and sex trafficking.
We've never had such a bad problem with child labor trafficking and child sex trafficking, and it is enabled by the Biden administration's policies.
Right. It's enabled by bad policy. It's predictable. It's just what's going to happen when you put people that don't know what they're doing in charge. There's an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost has to do with fixating on things like white supremacy, when in reality what we're talking about are a bunch of dudes with a bunch of tattoos that are doing basic gang work, basic organized crime at this point, street-level organized crime. There are MS-13 cliques that are doing the same thing. I don't hear them called Latin supremacists or anything like that because that doesn't sell. And I actually hear them downplayed. How much MS-13 are you hearing on the left-wing media? Not much. The Tren de Agua guys coming out of Venezuela, they look pretty hateful. They're covered in head to toe with tattoos. I don't understand that instinct, by the way. It's like, okay, I know who to shoot first. The guy who has the face tattoos, the back of the head tattoos, the neck tattoos, the arm tattoos all the way down to his fingers. Like, I don't know. You're just probably not raising kids like me in a neighborhood. So I'm going to have my eye on you. You're going to be the first one that I'm going to draw on. That's just how I operate. I do a threat, no threat assessment, and the dude that has tattoos that run all the way from the top of his eyelids back to the back of his ears is probably on my list of people that's going to get knocked down first. I could be chosen wrong. I could be wrong. It could be somebody else. But the odds are that's who I'm going to be looking at. All of this is to say the scariest thing that I've heard, and I'm not going to belabor it anymore. I'm going to give you examples after the fact of why this is so scary. This is Kamala Harris saying the thing that nobody should ever say when running for president. She is laying out, I think this is, I'm telling you, this is what I would consider to be, and I don't mean to sound hyperbolic, a declaration of war against American freedoms. Because you have a right to be incorrect. You have a right to be a hateful a-hole in the world, in the United States. That's what the First Amendment says. We don't have to agree with what you say. We don't. You have a right to say it anyway. And the government getting involved in speech, which they've continually been doing, and that's the entire point of what the sort of information and censorship complex that you hear guys like Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi talking about, and you hear other journalists that are in the independent space talking about being silenced. It is scary as hell. And it's not the first time she said it. I'm going to give you this. This is her talking in front of the NAACP. She's pandering to a race-based group. This stuff, it's chilling. We'll break it down in a second.
And we'll put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community. And we'll put...
What on earth is she talking about? They're going to double down on the Civil Rights Division that shouldn't even exist? The Civil Rights Division of the FBI and the DOJ, the prosecution and the investigation end of it, are probably the most dangerous pieces of our weaponized government. I'm going to read you a story. You're seeing it on the screen already, coming from Catholic Vote. This is in the Loop this morning. Pro-life prisoner Heather Idoni suffers further mistreatment under the U.S. Marshals. Everybody who's been telling me the U.S. Marshals are great, I don't have any bad experience with the U.S. Marshals, but they deal with people who are prisoners, and they have the same kind of bigoted ideology that anybody might. And some of them are going to be conservative, and some of them are not. And this sounds pretty awful. I haven't independently validated this. I'm not in a position to do that. But let's just read what it has to say, because I know that this woman actually is in Marshal custody. Pro-life activist Heather Idoni was imprisoned by the Department of Justice under the Biden administration for trying to rescue the unborn at late-term abortion clinics. Okay, so let's break that into non-advocate speech. She was protesting outside of an abortion clinic. Her and her husband, who are both heavily involved in pro-life work, have 5 biological children and have adopted 10 boys from Ukraine. Interesting. She's been behind bars since August of 2023. That's the Biden administration's work. And she's been convicted and sentenced in 2 trials, one in Washington, D.C., the other in Nashville, Tennessee, on charges of violating the Pro-Abortion FACE Act and a quote-unquote conspiracy against rights. They love the conspiracy against rights. Donald Trump has been charged with conspiracy against rights, folks. It's this idea that you are thinking about violating people's civil liberties, when in fact, that's what this organization does. The DOJ and the FBI have been heavily involved in both the trials, obviously. They're the prosecution end of it. And they've targeted peaceful pro-lifers. No allegations of violence. No charges of violence. No allegations thereof. She faces further charges. She has a 3rd trial in Detroit, Michigan for the same thing. This woman went around the country praying outside of abortion clinics. You guys have seen what this looks like. They'll sit down on the ground. And it turns out if you think that they are murdering unborn human children in there, you can see why they might get pretty riled. I used to think that the folks in the 90s that were setting up and like shooting abortion doctors were really nuts. I was like, what kind of a whack job would you have to be laying outside of an abortion clinic and shooting somebody that does that? Until you start realizing and thinking like, oh, if you have the belief that many Christians do, that what is happening inside those walls is someone killing human beings wholesale, then you start realizing, oh, okay, got it. That's why you think that you're saving lives in that. And I can totally understand why that would be. I don't condone it, but I understand it. All right, so she had Calvin Zastro, who is another pro-life advocate, notified Catholic Vote that due to the various trials, she's been subjected to multiple moves between federal prisons. That makes sense. 3 times now during transit. The marshals have been responsible for tightening the chain around her waist so tight that it's been difficult for her to breathe. I can also believe that. If they felt like sometimes the process is the punishment. That's why they do these things. Apparently, now they get a little bit, I think, over the top on this one, said that the U.S. Marshal Service issued effectively a death threat, warning that if she complained more, that they would tighten the chain even more. Okay, so you go, okay, is this all garbage? That's what I would say. I would look at it and say, I don't generally believe that the Marshal Service is involved in this kind of stuff. But then we start looking at her medical complications. Now, we've heard that the federal prison system should be doing transgender surgeries to make people feel comfortable because they mentally think that they are something they are not. And we're going to all pay for it. How about basic things that we all think should be taken care of, like diabetes? Should you have diabetes? Probably not. But if you do, we still have to treat you like you do. Look, I've been a medic on an ambulance. I actually applied for a job a long time ago where I was going to work as a medic in a prison. And they deserve treatment as humanely as possible because they are under federal government's responsibility or the state government's responsibility. Once you take somebody, they always say, once you put the cuffs on, you own them. That means you're responsible for their outcomes as well. You can't stop their health problems, but you do have to treat them. She has diabetes. She suffered a stroke just a few months ago after being held in solitary confinement for 22 days continually with the lights kept on. That's not fun, by the way, folks. It's actually much better to sit in the dark. The treatment qualifies under the UN standards of the Nelson Mandela rules for prolonged solitary confinement and is defined as torture, according to this article. Again, take that for what it's worth. She was held in federal prisons in Washington, D.C. She was denied diabetes medications as well as essential heart medications to the point where she had a stroke in March. And then they had to move her to a hospital where they finally actually properly started administering the medications. She was in the middle of a phone call with a journalist when she started experiencing heart palpitations, and the journalist actually contacted the DCPD, who had to do an emergency dispatch and moved her into the hospital for monitoring. She doesn't look like a healthy lady. She's obviously not very young, and they're treating her in this way. That's why when they start telling me, when Kamala Harris says that we're going to start upping the ante and we're going to fix and make bigger a civil rights organization within the FBI, which probably shouldn't even exist. That thing was created to go after like Jim Crow violators and stuff in the Deep South. It was an attempt to basically bring down the Klan. And now it's being used to go after people that they think are an extension of the Klan, which is to say all conservatives. This is the reason why the whistleblowing activity we did against the so-called radical traditionalist Catholics in Virginia was so dangerous to me. And by the way, it's nothing short of shocking to see former FBI agents come out and call that a hoax when they can read it with their own eyes. And people who have a lot more experience in the FBI and have a lot more credibility to me have read it and lost their jobs over that thing. I'm talking about a guy named John Nance who writes over at Town Hall, who's a world-class coward, and he was my boss for 6 months. What he didn't realize is that being my boss didn't mean that I actually somehow subjugated myself to him. So it's kind of funny. Every so often, like every month or so, he writes I would call it a hate piece, not a hit piece, because they're just weak. And he talks about how Marcus Allen is so great, but Kyle Seraphin and Steve Friend are the worst. He used to say Steve Friend was really great, but now everybody that he doesn't like is a so-called whistleblower. So just be aware that there are information ops happening, and they're not always being run by the government. They're just being run by people that are useless. There's a lot of people that are useless out there. When we talk about this, the thing that was shocking to me is because I actually heard this stuff about diabetes and all these things. It makes me think, if our prisoners are not being treated well, it's not like it's uncommon to have these problems. So you'd think that this caring, compassionate, left-leaning government would at least have the ability to treat people with dignity. And this is what it really is distracting you from. If you're listening to stuff about HAARP and Project Popeye and cloud seeding and hurricanes, what you're not paying attention to are the things that are actually within your control that are actually killing people. How many fat, uncomfortably overweight, out of shape, could do something about it but won't Americans are being distracted by their conspiracy theories about how the government's trying to kill them. Meanwhile, they are killing themselves because they've given responsibility for their own things that are within their own control. You can't control government information ops. You can't fight a government that's too big for you, that you have no ability to go out there and you don't even have the information. What you can do is control what goes into your mouth. You can control your level of fitness and your discipline if you want. I think this is the real thing that's crazy. Everybody that is distracted and calling everything I don't agree with is a psyop. I get this all the time because I'm on social media and it's terrible. All of the psyop stuff, what it's done is it's basically relieved you of the responsibility of doing the things that are within your own power. And the things that you can do are control how you eat, how you approach the world, how you pray, how you speak uncensored, how you hold yourself accountable for saying things that are true. And they do want to stop that. And that's the real danger. The danger always comes down to this thing of censorship and the disregard for human life. This is a Joe Rogan clip I saw. I just want to play it because it's mind-blowing. I'll talk about this doctor in just a second.
We are getting destroyed, and it's very recent, and it's accelerating. The stats speak for themselves. You know this very well. 74% of Americans are overweight or obese. 50% now of American adults have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. These were diseases where there was 1% of Americans in 1950 had type 2 diabetes. Now it's 50% of Americans have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Alzheimer's, dementia are going through the roof. Young adult dementias have increased like 3 times since 2012. So early onset dementias, we're seeing, this 1 in 2 Americans are expected to have cancer in their lifetime now. 1 in 2, and young adult cancers are going up 79% in the last 10 years. We've got, of course, the autism rates are absolutely astronomical. 1 in 36 children has autism now in the United States. That was 1 in 150 in the year 2000. And in California, where I live, it's 1 in 22. 1 in 22 with a lifetime neurodevelopmental disorder.
Infertility, she goes on, the fertility rates are going down, which is not just because people are not wanting to have kids because they've been talked into that, but also because they're unable to because of the actual lack of health that they have. This woman's name is Casey Means. She's a medical doctor. She's a head and neck surgeon. She trained at Stanford. No slouch. Like, she trained, and she's got to be roughly in my age bracket. So a time when Stanford actually really meant something. And she's a white lady, which means that she probably had to come uphill and fight uphill a little bit to be able to get into that spot. The stuff she was dropping on there is truly nuts. Here's another thing that most people don't realize, because how many of us have now started looking with this very, very side glance eye at our medical practitioners? The upside of having friends that are doctors, and I have a couple, is that you realize that they're just people. And they know a lot of things about some things, and they don't know anything about other things, just like all of us. There are things that I don't know a lot about. I'm a terrible mechanic. I can probably do more than most people, it turns out, because I have mechanical understanding, but I'm not a mechanic. I can't go in and run diagnostics on my car. It's just not my skill set. So I outsource that, and I don't like it. What I can do is evaluate nutritional information. I can read a study, just like all of you can, if I care to. How many people have sat there and listened to doctors tell them about diet and exercise with no specifics, realizing that none of them, or a huge chunk of them, have very little training in that field? And by the way, I went through college level nutrition classes, and it's like some of the dumbest bricks that you've ever seen. PhD and master's level nutritionists, some of them are just absolutely useless. I'll share a story because it's funny. I had a guy sitting next to me, and he was a bodybuilder. You could tell, like, he was huge, weirdly muscular on a frame that didn't belong like that. And he's talking to this like very dim bulb who was real sweet, but clearly like kind of a loony lefty, silly lady that's got a master's degree, and she's teaching this undergraduate survey course. And he said, well, they're talking about eggs and cholesterol, and it's like mediocre information. This is a woman who said that there's no digestion that happens in the mouth. And I was like, that's not true, because there's totally digestion that happens in the mouth. There's absorption that happens of simple sugars. It's called buccal absorption, and it happens in the cheek, and the tongue can do some of it as well. It's the way that we bring back diabetics when they're unconscious and they can't swallow. And this lady was talking about this. And so anyway, the guy's like asking questions. And one of the things he asked about was, what happens if somebody eats like a dozen eggs a day? And she was like, why would anyone do that? And I was like, because he is Gaston. And none of them knew that I was talking about a Disney movie. Like, these are the kind of people we're talking about that are running it. How about the idea that we actually don't even have knowledge of nutrition by the physician that's out there trying to treat your issues? This is the amazing part. So much of this stuff is within your control. And the things we're hearing about in the hurricane, the prison system, is that people aren't getting their medications. We're not even asking why they're all on medications in the first place. Kamala Harris just did a news conference about this. We're going to give you $750 from FEMA. Okay, fine. All of that's bad. So you can afford it. The first thing she stated was you can afford your prescriptions that you need. Why do we assume that everyone's on prescriptions? Because they're on prescriptions because they don't take care of their bodies. Like, they've outsourced and given up. So many people have actually ceded the authority of the only thing that you're truly sovereign is the things that go into your own body and the way you take care of yourself. And so many people have given up on that. It's shocking to me. Listen to this lady lay this out by the numbers, because that's the scariest part.
That is ultimately, those are not the tools that actually generate foundational cellular health. 80% of medical schools in the United States don't require a single nutrition course, not 1 minute of nutrition. And yet 90% of our healthcare costs are tied to diseases. The things that are torturing American lives are tied to food. And doctors, it's not a hammer in our toolbox. I didn't learn I didn't learn at Stanford Medical School that 95% of the people on the USDA Food Guidelines for America committee had a conflict of interest with the food industry. I didn't learn that there were 8,000 conflicts of interest at the NIH. I didn't learn that there are 8 billion tons of plastic on planet Earth that are degrading into estrogen, analogs. I did not learn that there's 6 billion pounds of pesticides sprayed on our global food supply every single year, most from China and Germany, and that these are literally tied very strongly to Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, obesity, mitochondrial dysfunction, infertility, ADHD, liver dysfunction. I didn't learn that, simply taking 7,000 steps per day can slash your risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, even gastric reflux by 40 to 60%. And the average American's walking 3,500 steps per day. Like, we're literally just not moving as a country. And if you just walk a little bit, 7,000 steps, which takes like 45 minutes, you slash your risk of every major, chronic disease. I didn't learn that we need to be getting sunlight because circadian biology dictates our cellular health. Like, we are diurnal animals that have biologic processes that happen during the day and other biologic processes that happen at night. And the way your body knows whether it's day or night is if you get photons hitting your retina and your skin cells. Pretty basic, pretty foundational for human health. Didn't learn anything about it.
Go watch that if you guys want to see the rest of it. You can tell that it's a great discussion on that. 7,000 steps is not very many. Most people would do that if you walked just a little ways, like not just to your car. If you parked at the end of the parking lot and then walked around in a grocery store as you shopped for food instead of hunting your food, you'd still get a lot closer to that. But we don't do it. I threw the chat up there on purpose because it's exactly what happens. We don't sell pills. We don't sell pharmaceuticals, which is top of mind awareness for someone like Kamala Harris in the middle of an emergency when they're giving out $750 for FEMA. The first thing she mentioned is the pills that you need. Why do people need those pills? Because they're not taking responsibility for the things they can actually handle. And instead, they're focusing on this kind of crap. Things that you can't handle. Look, if there's a government program out there, let me just say that I'll give it to you. Let's say there is a government program out there that's based out of the University of Alaska Fairbanks that is slowly modifying the weather and moving tornadoes at you. What the shit are you going to do about it? Nothing. And if you're overweight, what are you going to do about that? Also nothing, because you're paying attention to what the government's doing that's beyond your control. This is learned helplessness. We talked about it the other day. If you say the problems are too big for me to handle, but at least I know about it, at least I know it's coming, you are a fool. You can handle all kinds of things. I talked to George Hill the other day. George Hill is not a young man. He's not an old man either. And every day he PTs hard. He punishes his body to the point when doctors look at him, they go, man, I can't believe that. When I go into the VA, which is not very frequently, but when I go in there, they ask me, what medications are you on? And I say none. And they're like, how old are you? And I go, I'm 42. And they go, well, I mean, I'm talking about medications that you take every day. And I'm like, I'm 42 years old. There's no reason I should be taking medications every day. What the hell are you talking about? It's so normalized in American culture that people are learning the helplessness, the weakness, that they don't do anything about it, the things they can, and they fixate on the stuff they can't. And you would know that when you hear actual free speech and people focusing on real things instead of like algorithmic drives of learned helplessness and garbage, media messaging, curated narratives. This is another Joe Rogan clip. I have 3. That's heavier for me than normal. But listen to the beginning of this. This is Kamala Harris at the beginning talking about how she wants to regulate free speech. And that's why I would call that a declaration of war against Americans. It is our first fundamental liberty to worship as we choose, and you can't do that if they're out there trying to arrest you. Catholic Vote also mentions in their article the disproportionality. It's over 90% prosecutions in the FACE Act under the Biden administration are against pro-life Christians. They are not against people who have been destroying churches, even though we've all seen videos of that happening. They're only interested in pushing death, abortion, death of babies. And that's why they have to control the speech.
That is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
Okay, right away.
Yeah.
There's no way to misconstrue that.
What does that mean?
Oversight and regulation for free speech is ridiculous.
Yeah, totally.
Just that alone, there's no way to misconstrue that, right? Mm-hmm. What she was saying is what I was thinking she was saying.
She was saying something fundamentally un-American, which is that you don't have a right to have your own opinions and say the things that you want the way that you want. And the only way, J.D. Vance said it the other day, and I'm going to cover it again, the only way that you permanently silence somebody saying things that you don't like is by killing them. And I've got a little video that I'm going to play you that should make you very, very uncomfortable. I will play that in 1 second. Before we do, how about my friends over at Shield Arms? The only way you keep this stuff at bay is by being a owner of a firearm. You guys can check out some of the outstanding ones they have over at shieldarms.com. They also make knives. They make soft gear, which is going to be like chest rigs and fanny packs and things like that, which they have one called the Junk Sack that I own and I actually use regularly. Shieldarms.com is the website. Promo code Kyle, just like usual, KYLE, saves you 5% site-wide, including on the guns, which you won't see that anywhere else. They have the guns. You can go hold on to them if you want to go to like a Bass Pro or a Cabela's and kind of finger them and see what they're all about. They're really, really well made. They do all the upgrades you would do. So when you buy them from the factory that they have and they make their own parts in Montana in a place called Big Fork, if you go out there and buy them, you're not going to need to go around and upgrade this thing. You add an optic to it and you're good to go. So check their stuff out. Again, shieldarms.com, promo code KYLE, link in the description. Listen, it all ends in this. This guy says the quiet part out loud. This is a guy named Phil Lowcock, PhD. He is a currently suspended, non-suspendable professor at the University of Kansas. And his statement is pretty troubling. He said we should line those guys up and shoot them. Now he's on leave on it. Oops, major mistake. Let me just play you his own words. There's no reason to mix anything up. It's not even close. And he knows that he screws up right after he says it.
Guys are smarter than girls. You got some serious problems. That's what frustrates me. There are going to be some males in our society that will refuse to vote for a potential female president because they don't think females are smart enough to be president. We could line all those guys up and shoot them. They clearly don't understand the way the world works. Did I say that? Scratch that from the recording. I don't want the deans hearing that I said that.
The guy's out of breath with excitement at the idea of lining up and shooting men that don't agree with him. You'll notice the pot belly and the general like malaise and the sort of fatness that exists for that kind of dude. He's out of breath by just standing and doing a lecture series. Wow. That's what happens when you empower that sort of thought processes, that we need to censor it. Nobody says that women are not smart enough to be president. I still don't want women to be president for whatever it's worth. I don't, but it's not because of their intelligence level. It has a lot more to do with some other things. But his idea that men who don't agree that women are smart enough to be president need to be shot is also not an American idea. And it turns out the woman who's running for president sounds like she sort of agrees with him, doesn't she? Again, here she is saying what she wants to do. They want to regulate speech. They want to grab and build up the weapon system that goes after. And what she says is not crime, but threats. Threats are national security terms. Threats are things that you mitigate. In the law enforcement and military world, for the armed people in the world, when you deal with a threat, you stop it generally by force. That is what we do. And she's very specific about that word because she doesn't say we're going to stop criminals who are doing things that are illegal. She says we are going to eliminate threats. And that is fundamentally violent. This is a call to arms for people that know what it means, particularly those who are in your government, not the ones that are manipulating the hurricanes or whatever other wild ideas you have. You can't stop people that have top secret skills and lasers that are going to be moving things around and dropping rain on you. What you can do is worry about people that did my old job that don't know what their oath means. And by the way, as we talked about yesterday, there's a lot of them. I just found out some information about that guy. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow with Steve.
And we'll put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy.
There is a threat a threat to our democracy, as we speak about all the time here. We don't have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic that has been eroded pretty significantly. It's been eroded because of a lot of really bad ideas. But what do you do to threats? You mitigate them. I'll give you guys one more thing. This is sort of like apropos of nothing, but here is something you might as well know about. This is something I saw as sort of if you send your kids to school, remember, you are outsourcing the raising of your children when you send them to government schools. And it turns out nobody loves your kids the way you do. Nobody is going to treat your kids the way you do. And when you have some of the morons that are out there that are running around in the school system, there's some brilliant teachers, I'm sure of it. I had some. There's also whatever we're pushing out of universities today that think that they can do whatever they need because it's more advantageous. When you stop believing that the purpose of your job is the function of your job, in other words, if you are a teacher, then you consider yourself to be an educator, and education of other people, that's how you measure your success. Instead, you do like those dock workers who think people need jobs, or the people that we found out that were running the school unions during COVID stuff. What do we find out? They believe that the teacher's safety is what's most important, that the teacher's ability to have a paycheck was the function of their job. No, you do a job and you get paid for it. But if you don't believe that, maybe you start dosing kids and drugging them so they're much easier to handle. This story is crazy. So I just wanted to let you guys know what it was so you're more educated in case it's happening in your area. And also, homeschool your kids.
New tonight, parents of some pre-K students in Spring are outraged after they say some teachers have been giving their children sleep patches at school.
In an email sent to parents today, the school saying Spring ISD police now investigating. Matt Doherty is talking to some of those parents tonight. He joins us live in Spring. Matt.
Yeah, the parents say that 2 teachers and 2 aides have been suspended so far. Still, they don't feel comfortable sending their kids back to school. What happened with the sticker?
The sticker makes me fall asleep.
This is 4-year-old Lane Luviano. She's the one that broke this case open in September when she snuck one of her sleepy stickers out of the classroom.
She kind of pulled up her little shorts and said, "Mom, look, this is my sleeping sticker." And I was like, "The what?"
When Lane's mom, Lisa, saw the sticker, she thought it was strange and asked her daughter about it. And the teacher gives it to you where she put it?
On my arm.
On your arm? Which part? Point to it. Right up there?
Yeah.
And what's it look like?
Sleeping with a moon on it.
Lane's dad says he's known something was wrong since school first started.
2 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing some noise in the room, and I'm going over there. She's still up.
And so she gives you the sticker. You put the sticker on, and it makes you tired?
Yeah.
Wow. And all the kids get them?
Yeah.
They never notified the parents.
So Lisa took matters into her own hands. She reached out to the other parents in Lane's class, sent them pictures of the patch to see if their kids were getting the stickers too.
I showed it to my 4-year-old, and she said, yes, that's the sleepy sticker.
Melissa Guilford immediately went online to research the sticker.
Sleep Z patch. Okay, so, and if you read the ingredients on them, it has a lot of, it's just things I've never even heard of.
And they're giving them drugs to make them sleep, to keep them quiet.
Najala Abdullah tells us she'd noticed changes in her son, who told her he'd been getting the stickers too. She says he'd been crying, stopped eating, and was bringing home lunches that he hadn't touched. The parents shared with us an email they received from Northgate Crossing Elementary's principal today. The email states 2 of the school staff members were put on leave after they allegedly administered sleeping supplements to students on September 24th. The email also states the Spring ISD Police Department is investigating. You think it could be a crime?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
All right. When you have a society and a culture that thinks that pills, that drugs are the solution to the problem, and that the government is a good stand-in for a parent, of course you're going to have this kind of stuff happen. Are we talking about something that is widespread? I have no idea. Probably not. Most people are not so bold. But that attitude of, if you don't agree with me, then we should just shoot you. And if your kid is just inconvenient, then I'm just going to go on Amazon and find some things that are going to knock them out, some untested chemicals that I have no right to administer as a teacher. But where does that attitude come from that you could do that? Where would anyone think that would be reasonable? Maybe from the kind of person who says, when we talk about the children of the community, we're talking about the children of the community. You know, the retard that's out there running right now that wants to be president. that thinks that your speech is dangerous, that your own independent thought is dangerous, that thinks that the first thing you should do with money given to you by the government is give it back to pharmaceutical companies for your prescriptions. That kind of person. That person that thinks that if you say otherwise, that you're a potential threat. I don't like it. By the way, they didn't used to like her either. Can we just remember this? I saw Dinesh D'Souza put this video out. I'm going to end with this, and then I promise you, I have something kind of funny to end with because it is a little heavy. But here's a compilation. Like I said, it'd be a shame if people saw more of this. People on the left knew that she was a terrible candidate. The fact that they're pretending otherwise once again shows you that media capture. It shows you that they're willing to do edits of their own from internals, even though they did the right thing by asking good questions, even though they used to call her out when she was garbage. It all has to be replaced, like the same little meme of the chip getting pulled out of the back of the head. Here's a Kamala compilation for you.
There are reports that say that you have the lowest approval rating of any vice president. Well, there are polls that also say I have great approval ratings.
Swing voters don't like Harris. How big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
She's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision.
They don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her.
Kamala Harris's approval rating is now at 28%, which is an historic low for any modern vice president.
We're hearing it from mainstream media, one outlet after another, one leak after another. That Kamala Harris is the worst vice president ever, the worst politician ever.
We don't see the vice president. What people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying it to you, where is the vice president? Some White House officials are feeling that she came off looking unprepared for inevitable questions about when she might visit the southern border.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
The point that Lester Holt was making was obvious to anyone else who was watching this interview, which is that the issues at the border are inextricably linked with the portfolio that she's been given.
The border is secure. We have a secure border.
Bidenomics is working.
Prices have gone up. And families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up.
He picked Kamala Harris to be his running mate. She was ranked and is ranked as the most liberal senator in the United States Senate. So he could have gone the other way, but he went to the left.
Joe Biden is running for re-election, and I will be his ticket mate. Full stop. Full stop. That's it.
There it is. I promise you guys, I will play you something fun because it's been heavy. It's been like a heavy week, I feel like. All this stuff between the weather, between the chaos, and the fact that we have someone who's running for president right now that openly hates American freedoms. So we'll get there in a second. Before we do, how about a little review? I don't know what I'm going to call this review, but this is coming from Spotify. On Spotify, we ask you a question. Do you have any questions, comments, or sarcastic remarks? And I get all of those, so I'm going to play two back-to-back here. This one's pretty funny. This is from our show in the UK talking about riots or civil war inevitable, episode 363. We had a woman say, I agree. This is Priscilla. She said, women shouldn't be in politics. We're way too emotional. And then she's responded to another woman, I think, who says, this man is so far behind what's happening, I couldn't finish a single episode. Look around just a little. You'll find much better. I think proving the fact that Jade was, in fact, emotional. Very fun. Listen, I get a kick out of your comments, whether you agree with me or not. I actually don't care. I think it's fun. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to disagree. We're supposed to think critically and have our own opinions. Just back it up with facts. Don't back it up with like, I saw something that happened in the 1970s and therefore it must be happening today because you can imagine how bad it would be. That's not good enough. It's not good enough for me. You know what is good enough for me is a good edit. If CBS and 60 Minutes did a fun edit and actually put their editing skills to work, we could get this one. This is from Maze over on X. You guys will get a kick out of this. This is Joe Biden having a fantasy conversation with Donald Trump. Don't you miss that? That was only like 2 months ago. We got to have the fun Biden versus Trump times. And so this video is maybe a little out of date, but it's still equally funny. Let's just smile at what happens when you do fun editing. This would also be a problem for those who hate free speech, by the way.
We created the greatest economy in the history of our country.
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective.
The unemployment numbers for African Americans, for Asian Americans, for Hispanic Americans. Virtually every number was the best.
Inflation rate month to month was just an inch.
We had the best stock market price ever.
I got that. But guess what we are? We're in a position where for the last several months it hasn't spiked.
You know what? She deleted 33,000 emails.
How that could possibly happen. How anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
I think it's disgraceful what she's done.
I mean, honest to God, that's all I think.
The biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign.
I haven't. Look.
They spied on my campaign. They got caught.
Don't.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught.
Yes.
It was our Justice Department.
Yes.
It was Obama and Biden.
It's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's wrong. So wrong.
I think what happened was disgraceful. Should never have happened.
Think about that.
Should never have happened.
Think of how that has changed everything.
What kind of ice cream? What flavor ice cream do you have?
You think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you.
You just come in here with that negative attitude.
And it's much too early to make that kind of decision.
And when I finish, this country will be in a position like it hasn't been maybe ever.
I'm more optimistic than I've been in a long time.
So there you go. Yeah, you guys always hear me tell you, like, Trump is not my favorite. He does have some moments. Those are some of the funny moments, especially when somebody like goes out there and creates fan stuff. You can't create a fan video of Joe Biden because the guy sounds ridiculous. Luckily for him, he got kicked off. And now we have crazy Kamala, who wasn't liked all the way through the presidency of the other guy, right up until they lopped him off, cut him off at the knees, did the coup. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Listen, believe these people when they tell you. I think actions speak louder than words. I think that's true. But sometimes they tell you words that actually mean what they say. And line them against the wall and shoot them, that seems pretty clear. I get that feeling. Why would someone feel emboldened in 2024 to start talking like that? It's because the political left has been saying those types of things for the last couple of years, basically since Donald Trump came down the escalator. I think we all kind of know that instinctively. But it's always interesting when they say it because they feel comfortable to say it. In any case, hang in there. This week's only going to get weirder. We'll have Real Steve Friend on tomorrow for our Friendly Friday. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. Thank you for supporting the program. Thank you for listening to it. Despite any sort of glitches that may come down, I can't control the internet and I cannot control Rumble. But what I can tell you is you can find it on Locals. You can find it on X. You can find us on YouTube. And the internet will do what the internet does. At the end of the day, if it doesn't look like the stream made it out, I'll push it back out and repost it. I've got that ability. We're recording it every day locally as well. Otherwise, you can find us on Apple, on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Take your pick. Find it over there. And lastly, but not least, KyleSerafin.com is where our Locals channels is. If you want to join and do the call-in, we're going to do the call-in show again tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be live at 7 Central. It's going to be right at 5 o'clock on the West Coast. So as some of you are getting off work, call in. If you are a subscriber, let's chat. We'll have an interesting thing. You can tell me about your wildest theories on weather modification and try to convince me. That might be a fun thing we'll do there. All right, look forward to seeing you guys pretty soon. And until then, have a great Thursday.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.